At this time, I will call the June 20th, 2018 meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals to order. May we have a roll call, please?
Ms. Chester, Mr. Cho, Ms. McLaughlin,
Here.
Ms. Utman, Mr. Warmbrun,
Here.
Mr. Weisskopf,
Here.
and Mr. Welch.
Here, we do have a quorum. Are there any changes to the agenda? Hearing none, we'll move on to approval of the minutes.
I move that we approve the minutes from May 16, 2018.
Second.
It's now been moved and seconded. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed by the same motion? The motion carries. Are there any written communications? Any continued public hearings? At this time, I would need to swear in anyone who wishes to speak tonight. So, do you swear or affirm that any testimony you give will be true and accurate to the best of your ability?
Yes.
Thank you. At this time, we will call ZBA 2018-C-03 for hearing. This is our staff report.
And since these are all about the same address, I didn't know if you wanted to call all three. Did you call all three, or did you just
No,
call?
I never know. We can do that?
Yes.
Then,
Perhaps vote on them separately, at least the first one separately from the second two, because they're two different types of cases.
but we can call them off?
Yes.
Okay. At this time, I'd also call for hearing ZBA 2018-Major-08 and ZBA 2018-Major-09 for hearing. Is there a staff report as to all three?
Yes, there is.
Thank you.
So the applicant for all three applications is the property owner, Carol Osgood. She owns the property at 603 East Oregon. She has an existing garage on the southeastern portion of her property. It's a 672 square foot garage that is conforming. The property is in zoning conformance. She would like to add a accessory, what we term an accessory dwelling unit to the garage. She would like to make it a one-bedroom apartment that can ideally exist for when she gets older. If she chooses to stay in her home, that might be space for a caregiver to live in, or for a family member to possibly live in at some point, just to have another a separate living unit available on the property. She's making some improvements to her garage as we speak. In the city's zoning ordinance, there is a definition of what we call a dwelling unit in Article 2. That's basically three factors. If the unit has a separate means of entrance that's on the outside or separate from the rest of the main building, if it has a kitchen, and if it has a bathroom. Those three elements generally constitute something as a dwelling unit, so distinguishes just a room for rent in a house versus what might be a duplex. Now, this is not a duplex under consideration. I'm just saying for how we distinguish what a dwelling unit is. The fact that the applicant would care to add this living space with those three elements to her garage would constitute adding a dwelling unit to her garage. Adding a dwelling unit to her garage changes some of the zoning on the property. It classifies it changes the classification of the garage. The garage currently exists as an accessory structure that is accessory to the principal structure of the main household. That accessory structure would also apply to a shed or any other minor building. the fact that she would be adding a dwelling unit would make it a principal structure. And because this property would then have two separate principal structures, because this is a detached garage, two separate principal structures, according to Section 5.3C of the zoning ordinance, more than one principal structure on a lot is permitted with a conditional use permit. So the fact, if she would care to turn an apartment add an apartment to the garage, that is the reason she is seeking a conditional use permit. A few other elements about, just a few other aspects of the garage. The apartment space would be about 450 square feet. It would be in the upper level of the garage, so to speak. You'll see that in the site plan in Exhibit D. I'm sorry, Exhibit C. And the layout is also on the next page. And would have just all the elements of a typical one-unit apartment. The garage would still have space for two parked vehicles inside below the apartment. The driveway has enough space for at least 2 to 3 vehicles to be parked for off-street parking purposes. So if the conditional use permit were granted, she could accommodate the required number of parking spaces for both the apartment and main household. 4 required parking spaces altogether would be required, and the property could accommodate both of those. Briefly want to mention that this is an R3 property, single and two-family residential, as are all the surrounding neighboring properties. So the reason for the conditional use permit has been stated. The reason that she must request the 2 major variances. In the zoning ordinance, an accessory structure is allowed to encroach into the required side yards and rear yards up to a maximum of, is allowed to encroach into the side and rear yard setbacks for a property according to Section 6.5B9, although it must maintain a distance of 18 inches from the property line. That is if a garage is an accessory structure. If this conditional use permit were granted, it would be shifting the status of the garage from an accessory structure to a principal structure. Principal structures must maintain the required setbacks of 5 feet for the side yard and 10 feet for the rear yard. So the garage is already constructed, it's already built, it's conforming in its current state. However, if the conditional use permit is granted, it would turn it into a non-conforming structure. So to avoid that, the applicant is requesting 2 major variance applications to be heard concurrently. They are major, not minor variances, because the deviation is greater than 25% of zoning ordinance requirements. Some points of consideration for the application, for both applications. It's worth noting that in the R3 district, a duplex is permitted by right without a conditional use permit if a property is that was platted before approximately 1970. There's a specific date in the ordinance, but I believe it's December 12th. I had to look up the exact, which this property was. If it was platted before then, that it must be at least 6,000 square feet and 60 feet in width, which this property is of that size. If this garage were attached, there would not be a need for this conditional use permit request. So it would be making the property similar to a duplex, although slightly different. Another aspect is that the property would still be conforming in all other aspects of the zoning ordinance, including FAR, open space, off-street parking spaces. The footprints on this property would be staying exactly the same. as well as parking accommodations, and the request would serve to allow a property owner to accommodate family members or a caretaker, as we're always trying to be in planning, trying to be mindful of an aging population. It also provides a more affordable living unit for the surrounding neighborhood with, without adding any additional significant additional construction. So essentially, it's beneficial for the property and for the community in those aspects without drastically affecting the neighboring properties or surrounding neighborhood. Through some of the requirements for a conditional use permit as stated in Section 7.2 of the zoning ordinance, the proposed use is conducive to the public convenience at its location. It's maintaining a residential use in a residential district. It does not greatly increase the density of that district either. 2, the use would not be unreasonably injurious or detrimental to the public welfare in the district. The structures are remaining the same as far as their footprint goes. There's no loss of open space. And all the parking could be accommodated. It wouldn't increase volume of parking on the street. And the third standard, the proposed use would conform to all applicable regulations and preserve the essential character of the R3 district. The request has similarities with that of a duplex, and like I stated, the changes are mainly in use. There are no changes to footprints. For the variance criteria stated in Section 11.3, 1, there are special circumstances and difficulties with the concerned parcel in carrying out the strict application of the law. This property is conforming in its current, or this structure is conforming in its current state. It's just a slight change in its status would make it non-conforming. The garage already existed when the applicant purchased the property approximately 25 years ago. 2, the proposed variance would not serve as a special privilege. The garage already exists and its structural footprint would not be altered. Number 3, the variance requested was not the result of a situation or condition having knowingly been created by the petitioner. Number 4, the variance will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. We've stated that the garage already exists, same footprint. Number 5, the variances will not cause a nuisance to the adjacent property because the footprints are staying the same. The density is approximately the same as well. Number 6, the variances represent the minimum deviation from the requirements of the zoning ordinance. The requests are so that the building could remain in its exact place without having to be significantly moved or changes made to its foundation. The recommendation based off of the staff report is that the board approved the proposed conditional use permit for ZBA 2018 CO3 for the reasons articulated with the following conditions. 1, the apartment is confined to the existing garage. 2, the existing garage has granted major variances to permit its encroachment as a principal structure into the required side and rear yards. Number 3, the garage improvements generally conform with the site plan that's submitted in this application. In Exhibit D. And number 4, that the structure conforms with all applicable zoning and building safety codes in the city. I want to add a note that if you choose to recommend approval with these conditions, that the site plan should also state Exhibit C and Exhibit D. That was oversight on my part. For the major variance requests for ZBA 2018 Major 08 and 2018 Major 09, staff recommends approval of both of those major variances with the condition, one condition, that the encroachments are only permitted for the existing garage, so that if the garage, something happened to it, it burned down, or it was significantly damaged for more than 60% of its fair market value, that if it were to be reconstructed, it would have to conform to the setbacks if it were to be rebuilt as a principal structure with a dwelling unit attached to it. It should be noted that for major variance requests, a two-thirds approval is required for recommendation to the city council, or a two-thirds vote is required for an approval recommendation to city council, and then it must be approved by city council. Are there any questions?
I just have a comment. After this is done, observation of the place wouldn't disclose much major difference. I mean, there would be differences, but not, since it's, as you said, in the existing footprint, correct?
I don't understand your question.
Well, it seems to me you keep saying the existing footprint, and I understand that. And it seems to me that the whole thing here is form over substance. If it's staying basically in the same basic confinement, all you're doing is changing the name, not significantly the physical, correct?
It's changing the status of the structure.
Status,
Yeah.
that's a better word than name.
If the applicant were adding just say a home office and a bathroom, they would not need the conditional use, but it's those three factors of bathroom and kitchen and a separate means of entrance. Usually when we see these sorts of building permits, we look for the kitchen and the bathroom are usually the two factors that go into making it a dwelling unit. So that's kind of what kicks this into a change in the status, and the fact that someone might be living there as opposed to just using it during the daytime is what makes it require a conditional use permit.
I see. Thank you. Are there any questions for staff? Thank you.
The applicant is also here if you have any questions.
Do you desire to speak to us? All right. Please come forward. And you have to sign in for record-keeping purposes. Thank you.
Well, I don't have too much more to say, just that this whole thing started when I'm going to be 65 in a few months, and I'm looking at retirement, and I'm looking at getting older. I just went through a couple years with my mom being in a nursing home. And so I started just thinking about the idea of what it would take to stay in my own home, looking hopefully way out there. And I love my home. I love my neighborhood. And I hope to live there the rest of my life. And so the main reason I am doing this is that it would provide a place for a caretaker to live. Also, property tax is expensive in Urbana. I mean, later and it keeps going up. I mean, it would also sort of be an opportunity to bring in some income if need be. I'm not positive I'm going to rent it out full time, right away, although it's costing an awful lot of money to build. But it's, I didn't realize that all these issues were even going to exist, or I'm not sure I would have started it, but it does, and I have, and I still really want to do it. And it's also going to be really cute because I really love interior design work. It's going to be an awesome place. So I guess that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant? Go ahead.
Do the stairs come down into the garage, or are they going to have it?
So I actually had built some of this before I was going with the city and permits and stuff, but, so we built an exterior door that goes into my backyard, and so there is an exterior door. And that's the only thing that's different about the garage.
Anything else? Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Is there any further discussion? No, then call the motion. First for ZBA 2018-C-03.
I move that we approve the proposed conditional use permit in case number ZBA-2018-C-03 for the reasons articulated above and with the following conditions. 1, that the apartment is confined to the existing garage. 2, that the existing garage is granted major variances to permit its encroachment as a principal structure into the required side and rear yards. 3, that the garage improvements generally conform with the site plan and exhibits C and D. Is that the one that you needed us to add? C too?
Yes.
Okay. Dated June 1, 2018, in the memorandum of case number ZBA-2018-C-03 submitted in this application. And 4, that the structure conforms with all applicable zoning and building safety codes in the city.
It's been moved. Do we have a second for that? I believe we're ready to call that for a vote.
Ms. McLaughlin,
Yes.
Mr. Warmbrun,
Yes.
Mr. Weiskopf, and Mr. Welch.
Yes, that motion carries, and it's approved tonight. Now, we call for vote, motion ZBA-2018-Major-08 and ZBA-2018-Major-09.
Okay, I'll move that we recommend approval of ZBA 2018 Major 08 and ZBA 2018 Major 09, and send the major variances to the city council with the following conditions. Number 1, the encroachments are only permitted for the existing garage.
It's been moved. Do we have a second for that motion? I believe now we're ready to call that for a vote.
Mr. Warmbrun,
Yes.
Mr. Weiskopf,
Yes.
Mr. Welch,
Yes.
and Ms. McLaughlin.
Yes.
That motion carries and will be sent to the city council to be heard at what meeting, please?
The July 9th meeting.
Thank you.
That's a special council meeting for those looking at their calendars at home.
Oh, all right. Thank you. Thank you. Is there any old business? Is there any new business? We just lost our audience, so if there's no audience participation. Staff report?
I just wanted to let everyone know that Christopher Marks will not be presenting to you in the future. He is leaving us for another community, but wanted to thank him for all of his work here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Besides everyone involved, that it's been a sincere pleasure working in this community and in this area for the last 3 decades. I hope it stays that way.
All righty. Any study session? Good. Then I move that we adjourn this meeting.